Well, if you're a wrestling fan, and I presume you are if you're watching this right now, can you remember when you first fell in love with professional wrestling? Do you know that moment? Do you remember the first time you even saw wrestling? Some people do, some people don't. I definitely do. And the first moment of professional wrestling that I remember has to do with today's subject. It's another Eras video here on the channel, and today we're talking about Jake the Snake Roberts. Jacob the Snake Aurelian Smith, the most iconic names in the history of professional wrestling. He's up there like Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Junkyard Dog, Andre the Giant, Jake the Snake. He's one of the most iconic names in the history of professional wrestling, and we're going to talk about him here today on the channel. This is my actual wrestling buddy, and I do remember the first time I ever saw professional wrestling, and I'm going to talk about it. It was 1991, and I'm going to spend a little time about Jake in 1991 because what an influential era. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I realize what a huge part Jake the Snake played in my early fandom. So many iconic matches and promos and moments. And he's coming to ASW this weekend as I'm taping this. And I wanted to do this video. I've been excited about doing this because what do you say to the person that first turns you on to professional wrestling? What do you say to an icon like Jake the Snake Roberts? What do you say to one of the best talkers in the business? I mean, come on. He had his own talk show on WWE, and that's some rarefied air when you think about the Roddy Pipers, the Jesse Venturas, the Brother Loves, who all got trusted with precious on-air time. Well, Jake the Snake, he was an amazing host, and of course, some of his biggest moments were there in the Snake Pit. But that was a little before my time. He was a heel for a lot of that early part of the 80s. He switched into one of the biggest baby faces of all time, as you can tell by this copy of the WWE magazine, 1991. And yet, by the end of the year, he had turned into one of the biggest and most hated heels in the entire company. And that is why Jake the Snake Roberts had one of the biggest 1991s of all time. I mean, from the most popular to the most hated heels. Jake, one of the most iconic names. He's one of those names, even people that don't watch wrestling know who Jake the Snake is. They can recognize Jake the Snake Roberts. And it's one of the few wrestlers that people who don't watch wrestling can name. But not only was Jake one of the biggest names and most iconic wrestlers of all time, but he had something that almost no one, maybe no one, will ever have again, and that's a protected finish, the DDT. Some of his earliest promos are just about the DDT because it was a new move in wrestling. It was dangerous, and he put Ricky Steamboat out of action with a DDT on the outside. Guess what? If you got the DDT, one, two, three, it was over. And I love the story of Jake saying that he saw a newspaper headline because DDT is actually a chemical that they use to like pesticide plants and stuff. And it said DDT deadly to man was a headline in the newspaper. And he thought, DDT deadly to man. And I love that. An iconic move. But the first time I saw wrestling, I remember it very well. It was 1991. I was 9 years old and we had just gotten cable TV. And I remember getting in the car after church on a Sunday, and I couldn't wait to get home to scan those 13 channels that cable had offered us. I couldn't wait to see the world of cable, what the world of cable had to offer us. And I was flipping through those channels, and I landed on the USA Network. It was All American Wrestling, and it was a replay of a moment that had taken place between Jake the Snake Roberts and the Earthquake. And it was such an iconic moment that they made an entire figure out of it. Here it is. And when I got back into collecting, man, I had to have this figure. Like they made a figure of the famous Damien snake squashing incident. They made a figure of the snake squashing incident. Earthquake squashed Damien right there before my very eyes and ears. I remember it so vividly. Earthquake's pear-like physique, and he looks at Jake and he says, the cameras pick it up, squash the snake. And they're like, no, no, no. Vince McMahon is classic. No, no. What's he going to do? What's he going to do? Don't do it. No, no, no. Ah. And they cut to Sean Mooney in the event center, like, oh, no. And on the version I saw, I think it was actually Mean Gene Okerlund who called it like one of the most despicable actions anyone has ever seen in the world of professional wrestling. And Jake the Snake, this is the July issue, so that was all around spring of 1991. That's when I first started watching wrestling. Jake, huge baby face, psychologically damaged by losing his pet. Oh, the humanity. And you listen to Vince, and Jake has to look in the bag, and it's terrible, terrible. And I'm thinking, like, as a kid, like, that turned me on to wrestling. Like, I think there was probably some kids in the audience that day who never wanted to watch wrestling again. But it turned into a full spread in this episode, this issue of the WWF magazine from July of 91. And this is Jake, huge baby face. You know, he'd been fighting Rick Rude prior to this. And I looked it up, and Jake fought 218 matches in 1991, according to Wrestling Database. And it has to be at least half of them are against Earthquake. And the crazy part about this is, after I started digging in, there's the snake incident, Earthquake. Oh, sitting right down on it. Oh, poor Jake. Look at that. I started looking into Jake's history, and he started out 1991 against Randy Savage, does a ton of matches with the Earthquake, but then, as we'll talk about a little bit, he ends right back up with the Macho Man, Randy Savage. And that's the thing you'll find looking at Jake's career, especially in the WWF, WCW days. He only fought big name guys. In fact, like I said, in 91, it was all Savage. It goes to all Earthquake. And then after the end of that, it goes to like Sid Justice. It goes to The Undertaker. And he's on his way out at WrestleMania 8. And again, one of the most vivid memories of my childhood was Randy and the reinstatement plan. We got to reinstate the Macho Man so he can come back and get back at Jake the Snake for biting him with the python. And that's what this Legends figure right here is based on. It's the classic scene. If you've seen it, you can't forget it. Jake the Snake putting the Cobra on to Randy Savage's arm. And again, like as a kid, I'm just fascinated by this. I've gone from loving Jake the Snake Roberts to hating him. And how could he do that to Randy Savage? And it's like vividly, it's burned into my memory of that snake just gnawing on Savage's arm. What an iconic moment. Holy cow. And so, of course, like a lot of fans, I wrote to Jack Tunney and I said, we got to reinstate the Macho Man so that he can get back at Jake the Snake Roberts. And that's exactly what happened. And it's funny, I just realized like there's a whole way that they get to the Tuesday in Texas pay-per-view. Because they suspended Jake for the arm biting. They reinstated the Macho Man, but they weren't going to fight at the Survivor Series, which a lot of people probably thought they were going to. And as it's famously portrayed, you know, that pay-per-view begins with an announcement of the Tuesday in Texas pay-per-view. And at that pay-per-view, Savage and would finally get his hands on Jake the Snake Roberts. And then it would lead on to the 92, early part of 92, which is, I believe, a Saturday night's main event. And Jake the Snake loses once again to the Macho Man. And Macho and Liz are coming back from the ring. And this is expert television. I mean, this is wonderfully crafted professional wrestling. Savage and Liz are on their way back, but they show Jake the Snake Roberts in the back. He's got a chair and he's waiting for them to come back through the curtain. And he even says, like, it doesn't matter who comes through first, they're going to get it. And Vince is losing it once again. You know, got to get word back there. Somebody tell him that Jake is back there. And he's going to swing the chair. And as he holds it back, and it looks like Liz is coming through the curtain first, Jake swings back the chair. It looks like Liz is coming back first, and the Undertaker grabs it and stops him. And it's what a beautiful transition because it opens Randy Savage up to like go on into the Royal Rumble and feud with Ric Flair and get into the world title picture. Meanwhile, puts Jake directly in a feud with the Undertaker, and they go on to fight up into WrestleMania in '92, WrestleMania 8, which is one of my favorite WrestleManias. I call it my comfort mania. And he takes the 1, 2, 3 there, and there's not a lot of evidence of Jake getting pinned 1, 2, 3. I think even against Hogan, like he lost by countout. But Jake did not take the 1, 2, 3 very many times, and he protected himself in that way, and he protected his finish, the DDT. And then, so like I said, it started with Savage and Jake, and it ended with Savage and Jake. It's funny because at the beginning of '91, Savage is a heel. He ends up feuding with the Ultimate Warrior, and by the end of '91, he's the most over baby face. The entire fandom is lobbying to have him reinstated so he can get back at the greatest heel of all time, Jake the Snake Roberts. So I did a little bit of research, and you know, Jake jumped to WCW. Also, again, I'm 10 years old, and Jake the Snake goes to WCW. Like Flair had jumped ship to not to WWF, And a few people had gone over to WCW, but there had not been like a huge surprise like it was when Jake showed up, took out Sting, and that led to kind of an infamously, unmemorable match at Halloween Havoc, the spin the wheel, make the deal match. But the promos and the build up were incredible to that, and I was just hooked as a fan. I wanted to know what kind of match they were going to have at Halloween Havoc, and years later when I got the network, you go and watch it back, and it just doesn't live up to the hype, sometimes, and that's the case with wrestling. Some of my research, I went back and watched this. It's a 2005 Jake the Snake Roberts DVD. And it has that match that I was just talking about, as well as a ton of other matches on here. A lot of his good ones. It's got some, I don't know, I don't love the 96 run. Obviously he's a part of that another iconic moment when he loses to Stone Cold at the King of the Ring, basically spawning the Austin 316 phenomenon. It's all based on Jake and his Christianity and his piousness in that second return in 96 when he was a born again Christian and carrying around Revelation. This is a great DVD. You get the heartbreaking story of Jake told by himself, heartbreaking story about his dad. You also find out, like, when he decided to get into the business, it was in spite of his dad. But yet, in the Louisiana Territory in the late 70s, his dad was a beloved and respected veteran, despite how horrible of a father and how poorly he had treated his kids so far. And he stuck around. Grizzly Smith stuck around for a long time in WCW. But one of the things you should check out on this is an early match. I think it's like from 1981 in Mid South of Jake the Snake Roberts, and he has not found himself. And it's crazy because he's like bopping around like this, like a baby face. You can tell he's watched some Dusty Rhodes. And he doesn't have the DDT. He's using a knee lift that he got from Mr. Wrestling 2. So really fascinating to see let's see, to see the premature Jake the Snake Roberts, I guess, knowing what he would go on to become. The other thing, there's a chapter, an entire chapter on this, and one of the eras of Jake the Snake Roberts is certainly that late 90s period, because after he leaves WCW, on this DVD, he claims that his wife wanted to have a baby and that he retired, but he was not retired completely, according to WrestlingData.com, because he wrestled a lot of independent shows until he came back in 96. But then, of course, after that, he was famously featured on this, Beyond the Mat. And I went back and I watched this again. I've got a lot of opinions on this and the aging of it. I don't know if I'll get into all of that right here, but it was in 99 when this came out, and this was out on Universal. This was a big time film made by Barry Blaustein. And it's hard to take yourself back to the era before we knew what was going on backstage, basically pre-internet or right as the internet was going on. This thing friggin' opens almost with people with Mankind or Mick Foley shooting a thing. It's like, oh, I want to get the camera from down here. You had not seen that. This contains Rock and Foley talking over their match before the show with their kids, and they're like all friendly. You just hadn't seen that. You knew it might be happening, but you hadn't seen it in an authorized fashion, and that's why I thought, looking back at this in '99, it was like fascinating and mind blowing that this would even be put out in the world. And yet, when I watch it now, I watch it after 9 years of ring announcing, after driving a few legends around and like getting to know what it's like for them as the old timers, so to speak, or from that era of the 80s. And like, it's not a big deal to me that Jake the Snake is sleeping backstage. Back then, it seemed like, oh, look how seedy it is on the indies. And of course, there's the scene of them going in a bucket. Well, that's not that uncommon, It's not at every indie wrestling show, but they were at like a Nebraskan, I think it was in Nebraska, like a livestock show, some kind of a riding barn. Well, of course, there's not a bathroom there for the guys to go to. And it really did not do Jake any favors in that film. And they talk about it, because in 2005, Jake was back in the good graces of the WWE. And there's a whole chapter on this DVD putting down the Beyond the Mat. And it's true. A lot of what they say on there is true in that, he didn't do a great job to Jake, and he was pretty much enabling him looking back on it. He drove him to go meet with his daughter that he hadn't met with. Blaustein does, and he pretty much sets that up for drama. He's producing his documentary through Jake's life, and it doesn't age so well. It doesn't age so well with me, particularly. And I have a ton of respect for Jake the Snake Roberts. He's not a perfect person by any means. But he's an icon in professional wrestling, and so many of those moments that are meaningful to me and some of my most beloved wrestlers, and some of my most memorable angles worth with Jake the Snake Roberts. My Hasbro, my original Hasbro is back there on that shelf. And this is my wrestling buddy that had hundreds of matches himself in 1991 or 92. He's hung in there with me, and I'm so glad to have this. And I was going to tell a story about 1999. It was around that time when this movie was being made that Jake appeared at the West Virginia State Fair. I have a couple of friends that were there. I wasn't there. But it's famous because, Jake the Snake Roberts was advertised to be there. And part of the way through the show, the rain starts coming. And Honky Tonk Man comes out and allegedly, like, spent a whole time promo in the audience. And the rain starts to come as soon as Jake the Snake Roberts makes his entrance into the ring at the West Virginia State Fair. DDT, 1, 2, 3, match is over. And then afterwards, I don't think Jake or Honky Tonk Man was anywhere to be seen. So anybody that sat through the rain to see that match probably left disappointed. And my buddy Matt Mullins, who wrote a song about Aurelian Smith, it's on his album. I'll link it in the description of this video. Matt Mullins was there, and he's the one who always told me that story, and I love hearing him tell that story about Jake in 1999 at the West Virginia State Fair. And thankfully, a third film that I watched again that's online, you can check it out, is The Resurrection of Jake the Snake Roberts. And thanks to DDP, Jake's doing a lot better now. There's a whole crew of wrestling fans now that probably think of him as the AEW personality, as a legend, but also a manager on AEW. And I hope this will inspire some people to kind of go back in time and visit some of Jake's greatest moments. I did a playlist, and I'm going to make this video a part of it, my Jake the Snake Eras playlist, so you can go back. It's probably going to be a lot of promos. There's a ton of really fantastic promos out there, and a few matches, a few good moments. But one of the promos that I love the most, and one of the quotes that I picked up on that I would like to leave you with today, there's a lot to look into this, was one of the quotes that I believe Jake said. He repurposed a few things over the years, but I believe he said to Ricky Steamboat, "It's more shameful to deny fear than it is to run from danger." You can't run from danger. You can't deny Jake the Snake Roberts, a true icon of professional wrestling. My name's Adam Harris, ring announcer, wrestling fan, and collector here in the Mountain State. I appreciate you watching along. I hope you'll come back next time. I hope to see you then. Come see us at the matches.